Mystery exploration. Darkness. History. Creepy apparition. Scary. Welcome to Cursed Stories. Hello, Night Wanderer. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell. The shadows appreciate it. Tell me where you're watching from and what time the nightmares begin. Now lean in. These aren't just stories, they're warnings. Let's begin. I don't know what I'm doing at this point, but I need to get it out somehow. Maybe sharing my story will help. I doubt it, but it's worth a shot. Here goes nothing. My name's Daniel Mathis. I used to be a detective, but I retired 2 months back. Well, maybe retired isn't the right word. Forced to quit is more like it. Either way, I'm not on the force anymore. That's enough about me though. If I'm going to tell this story properly, then I need to start at the beginning. The very beginning. It started 20 years ago. A child went missing. A little boy, only 10 years old. His name was Johnny. I'd worked on a few missing person cases before, but this one was different. Johnny was walking back from school with some of his friends. It was getting dark, so he decided to take a shortcut through the woods. His friends were too scared to follow, so Johnny went alone. Needless to say, he never made it home. His parents reported him missing a few hours later. We searched the area for days. We questioned every S** ex-offender in a 15-mile radius. Hell, we combed through every inch of that damn forest, but we never found him. Whoever took Johnny was smart about how they did it. They knew how to cover their tracks. It was almost like the kid vanished into thin air. Flash forward a month to mid-January, and I'm knocking on his parents' front door. It was snowing that day. I remember Paul, the kid's father, answered the door. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept in weeks. Despite this, he still made an effort to be polite. He gave me a weary smile and shook my hand. "Detective Mathis, come in," he said. "My wife's in the living room." His wife, Erin, was sitting with her back to me, staring at the TV. On the screen was a recording of Johnny, taken a couple months before he disappeared. It was grainy and blurry, the way home videos are. He had bright orange hair, freckles, and green eyes, just like his mother. In the video, he was dressed in a puffy jacket and playing around in a pile of leaves. It must have been taken in their front yard. "Mommy, Mommy, watch this," he yelled, getting a running start before leaping head first into the pile of leaves. He burst out a few seconds later, stray foliage clinging to his hair. "Wow, sweetie," Erin's voice said from behind the camera. Johnny flashed a beaming smile, showing off the gap between his front teeth before preparing to jump into the leaves once again. I stood in the doorway to the living room, watching the video unfold. Once it reached its end, Erin started it from the beginning. It was only a few seconds long. She gazed into the TV, rubbing her necklace with her thumb, silently whispering along. "Dear," Paul said, shaking her from her trance. "Detective Mathis is here." Erin looked over and paused the video. "Please, take a seat," Paul said, gesturing to a chair. Both he and Erin sat on the couch across from me, his hand holding hers as I started to speak. "Mr. and Mrs. McLean, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid that it is not good news. We have to call off the search for Johnny." Erin broke down immediately, sobbing into her hands. Paul squeezed his eyes shut, trying to stop himself from doing the same. To be honest, I felt like crying as well. I fought to keep it going for as long as I possibly could. But, well, Johnny's been missing for a month now, and we've run out of leads. We're going to keep the case open, but until any new evidence comes to light, well, there's nothing we can do. The living room was filled with the sound of Erin's wails. Paul tried his best to comfort her, but he was barely keeping it together himself. "You promised." Erin started to shout. "You promised you would bring him home." "Mrs. McLean, I am." "Why can't you bring him home?" she screamed. She rose to her feet and stormed upstairs, leaving Paul and I alone in the living room. "I'm sorry. I really am," I muttered, unable to look him in the eye. Paul wiped the tears away from his face before rising to his feet. "I think you should leave." I looked up at him, opening my mouth to say something, but no words came out. I simply nodded my head and rose to my feet. Paul was barely fighting back his tears as I left. As soon as I shut the door behind me, I could hear him break down and start to sob. Paul and Erin both died 15 years later. Paul started drinking and never stopped. Erin drove her car off a bridge in the middle of the night and drowned. I don't think they ever forgave me. Not really. To them, I was always the detective that failed to bring their child home. It was the 20th anniversary of the kid's disappearance, December 5th, when I came home to a letter. It had no return address or any distinguishing features. It was just a plain white envelope. There was no way it could have been delivered by a mailman. Someone dropped it off personally. I still have it somewhere, but I don't need to read it again to remember what it said. The words are branded into my brain like a hot iron. I sat at my dining room table, cut the envelope open, and started to read. Dear Detective Mathis, if things were different, I would have written this letter to Johnny's parents. I regret that I never got the opportunity to explain this to them. I know they never would have been able to understand, but I would have liked to explain it regardless. Enough about that, though. With them gone, I have decided that the only one worthy of my confession is you. I watched you search for me, you know? I watched your interviews on the news. I watched as every lead you had went cold. In fact, I've seen you in person. You wouldn't have noticed me. I would have just been another face in the grocery store or on the street. But I noticed you. I always noticed you, Detective Mathis. I am sure you have figured it out by now, but I am the one who took Johnny. I am the one who snatched him away in the woods 20 years ago. I still remember how I loaded him into my car. I remember how I knocked him unconscious. I remember how much I was shaking. I want you to know that I never touched him. Not like that, anyway. I want that to be known. On the back of this letter are coordinates. Follow them, and more will be revealed. And if you tell the police about this, you will be throwing away your only chance to do right by Johnny. No more mysteries, no more games. It's time you learn why I did what I did. I sat there reading and rereading that letter for what felt like hours. There were two possibilities. Either the person who took Johnny 20 years ago really had sent me a letter confessing his guilt, or someone was messing with me. And I did not know which was worse. I flipped the letter over and looked at the coordinates, careful not to touch the paper too much. If this really was written by the person who took Johnny, I wanted to preserve the prints. Staring at the coordinates, my first instinct was to call the station, but then another thought came into my mind. I knew that if I showed up with other cops and the guy who took Johnny was there, he'd just get arrested. If I went by myself, I knew I could give him what he really deserved. No witnesses, no one to stop me from putting a bullet in his head. Besides, I could have just said it was self-defense. This man put Johnny's parents through hell. I wasn't about to pass up the opportunity to put him in the ground. I took a picture of the coordinates and plugged them into Google Maps. It was about a 30-minute drive, located deep in woods outside of town. I threw on my coat, grabbed my gun, and raced out to my car. I'm surprised I didn't get pulled over with how fast I was going. As I sped down the interstate, the leather on my steering wheel creaked beneath my grip. My knuckles turned white and I caught myself grinding my teeth together. I thought about what the letter said, how he bragged about seeing me in public. How many times had I walked past this guy? How many times had I passed by someone on the street corner, and that someone was him? I wasn't a cop at this point. I didn't have my badge or my lights on. I was just angry and ready to kill a man. Eventually, I turned onto an old dirt road. I followed the directions until I came upon a trail into the woods. Parking the car, I grabbed the flashlight from my glove box and stepped out. It was twilight, and the forest was quiet, blanketed beneath a thick layer of snow. Not even the birds were making a sound. It was that kind of silence you only find in the dead of winter. As I trudged through the woods, I only became more furious. I imagined what it must have been like when Johnny was brought here. A million questions raced through my mind. Was he unconscious as he was dragged through the snow? Was he even alive? Did he leave a trail of blood, or was he wrapped tightly in a garbage bag? The coordinates took me off the trail and deep into the woods. I didn't even consider if I was going to be able to find my way back. I only had one thing on my mind. Finally, I reached the coordinates, only to find nothing. It was just a small clearing. Snow-covered ground, bare trees, and the dark sky hanging above. I shined my flashlight around, desperately searching for something, anything. I double-checked my phone to make sure I was at the right spot. I was. Stumbling over to a dead log laying up against a small hill, I sat down. I buried my face in my hands and wiped away a few tears as my breath disappeared into clouds of vapor. The snow came up to my ankles, and the cold seeped through my boots. I slammed my fist down onto the decaying wood. I did it again. Then again. I shot to my feet and spun around, screaming into the empty forest as I furiously stomped down on the log. The dry wood splintered and cracked beneath my boot as I yelled every profanity I could think of. After what must have been my 10th kick, my foot broke through the hollow log and slammed into something behind it. Something metal. I stumbled back, my foot throbbing in pain. Shining my light through the newly formed hole in the log, I saw a rusted metal surface hiding beneath it. I frantically rolled the log aside, the wood breaking apart as I revealed what was underneath. Brushing the snow aside, I realized that what I was staring at was the entrance to a bunker. My breathing was heavy as I tugged on the latch. To my surprise, it was unlocked. The heavy door groaned as I swung it open. I was greeted with stone steps leading down into the dark. Shining my light, I saw just how deep this bunker was. It must have gone down 10 or 15 feet before the steps finally stopped and gave way to an unlit hallway. Drawing my gun, I took a deep breath and started down the steps. Leaving a trail of snow and mud behind me, I reached the bottom of the stairs and shined my light down the hallway. At the end of the hall was a large metal door. My own breath was deafening as I approached. Against the wall, next to the door, was a dial. Holding my flashlight in the crook of my neck, I turned it. I flinched as some sort of intercom screeched on, blaring an old and grainy rendition of When Johnny Comes Marching Home. It began with deafening drums and an ear-piercing whistle before giving way to a cacophony of voices. When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah. Stuffing my gun into my holster, I clasped my hands over my ears as the sound of an entire choir echoed throughout the bunker. We'll give him a hearty welcome then, hurrah, hurrah. Pushing the metal door open, I stumbled into the room beyond and frantically looked for the source of the music. The men will cheer, the boys will shout, the ladies, they will all turn out. And we'll all feel G*Y when Johnny comes marching home. At the far end of the room was a computer with multiple monitors, one of which was hooked up to a loudspeaker. And we'll all feel G*Y when Johnny comes marching home. I grabbed the wire and ripped it out of the speaker, abruptly stopping the music. With the song no longer playing, I looked around to get a feel for my surroundings. I was in a concrete room with low ceilings and flickering fluorescent lights. It looked like an old hospital ward. The counters were populated by scalpels, operating tools of various sizes, and syringes. In the center of the room was an operating table adorned with leather straps. The whole room smelled like rubbing alcohol. The lights in the ceiling did a poor job at illuminating things, making the whole bunker feel claustrophobic and suffocating. The wall on the left was like something you would see in a mystery film. Hundreds of pieces of paper pinned to a notice board. Some of them had notes furiously scribbled down in handwriting I could barely decipher. Others, however, looked like printed-off images of star systems. A picture of the Milky Way hung next to an old newspaper clipping from 20 years ago that read "Strange lights spotted in the night sky." The wall opposite of that was, in fact, not a wall, but rather a glass divider, separating this section of the room from whatever was beyond it. Behind the glass was a thick blue mist, so dense that I couldn't even begin to see what was on the other side. "Johnny, are you here?" I shouted, running up to the glass and trying to peer through. Stepping back, I looked around the room in search of something to break the glass. That's when I saw it. On one of the computer screens was a recording titled "For Mathis." Approaching the screen, I moved the mouse over it and clicked play. "Hello, Detective Mathis." My grip on my gun tightened when I finally heard his voice. For 20 years I had imagined what this monster sounded like. Finally hearing it felt surreal. The voice was slightly garbled by a modulator, but I could still tell that he was around my age. Mid-60s at most. If you're listening to this, then you read my letter. If you were hoping to arrest me, or maybe even kill me, I am sorry to disappoint you. I have taken exhaustive steps to cover my tracks. Even if you manage to find my identity, I will be long gone by then. I clenched my jaw, imagining how satisfying it would feel to choke him out. I am sure you have many questions, and I think that this recording will answer most of them. But before I can explain anything, I think it is best to introduce you to someone. With that, the chamber behind the glass divider began to hiss. The fog quickly dissipated, and the room beyond was revealed. I don't think I'll ever be able to forget what I saw when the mist fully cleared. I still see it. Every time I close my eyes. Every time I fall asleep, I see that thing. On the other side of the glass there was I don't even know what to call it. It looked vaguely humanoid, but its limbs were more akin to an arachnid. Countless fingers with numerous joints sprawled forth from its palms like a spider web. Its skin was brown and covered in a thick layer of slime that dripped down onto the floor. Its emaciated torso was hollow, its ribs curling outward to form a central cavity that bellowed slightly as the thing quietly breathed. "Detective Mathis," said the recording, "meet the basilisk." Whether that is its true name or simply what it has chosen to be called is beyond me. As my eyes traveled over the creature's horribly misshapen and grotesque form, I saw something that made my heart sink into my stomach. Encased within its open ribcage was a body. It was small, frail, and wrapped in a cocoon of sinew. It dripped with a strange fluid, and parts of its discolored skin seemed to be merging with the creature itself. Taking a step towards the glass, I let out a quiet gasp when I saw the strands of orange hair hanging from its scalp. "Johnny?" I whispered. To my horror, one of his green eyes fluttered open, his irises bloodshot. He looked at me for a split second before his pupil rolled back into his head and he started to thrash about. He was alive. He was F*King alive. Through the glass, I could hear horrible, excruciating groans. I pray I never have to hear anything like that again. They reverberated off the walls of the bunker, the choked sobs of a child. A child crying not because he is sad or because he needs attention, but because he is in pain. I pressed my hand against the glass and fought back tears as I watched Johnny, the boy I thought had been dead for 20 years, writhe in agony before my eyes. Suddenly, his screams were overpowered by a low groan. A strange clicking noise filled the room as the many elongated fingers of the basilisk began to twitch. After a few seconds, Johnny's muffled screams were silenced. His eye fluttered shut, and he went still. As he stopped moving, so did the basilisk. "Johnny? Johnny!" I screamed, pounding on the glass. Neither he, nor the creature responded. Incredible, isn't it? The recording spoke again. The basilisk came to me 20 years ago. Its spacecraft descended from the stars before my very eyes. I was barely listening to the recording at this point. My eyes were fixated on Johnny as he lay motionless inside the creature's chest. Do you want to know the interesting part, Detective Mathis? When it came to me, I was a dying man. Brain cancer. Stage 4. Inoperable. His voice seemed sullen before perking up as he continued. The basilisk cured me. I should have died years ago, but it halted my tumor in its tracks. I began to look around the room, searching for some way into the chamber, but I found nothing. Johnny was completely sealed off. Can you see it? The fluid that it is secreting? In that fluid lies the cure to cancer. Can you imagine a world where we do not have to fear such a horrid fate? The enzymes in that fluid were the key. I knew that if I could isolate them, learn how to replicate it, I could make cancer a thing of the past. And the basilisk was willing to help me. The voice paused for a second, and I could hear the man let out a sigh. Except, it needed something from me. It wanted a child. I've replayed that part in my head more times than I care to admit. It never fails to make me sick. The basilisk is a creature of the abstract. It feeds off futures that never were. And there is no one who has more potential or imagination for the future as a child. Johnny is alive in there. The basilisk is keeping him alive, keeping his psyche trapped in the body of a child, dreaming of the future he never had. I know your first instinct will probably be to try and pull him out, but that won't save him. The basilisk has been feeding off of Johnny for 20 years. They are merged in body and mind. If you separate them, they both will die. I started to cry. I stumbled back and leaned against the operating table, unable to peel my eyes away from the glass. The voice sighed deeply. I know you think I am a monster, Detective Mathis. But I stand by what I've done. Do you know why? He sounded so arrogant. So damn smart. Because I figured out how to replicate the enzymes. In a few years, I will have a cure to every type of cancer there is. Do you know how many children die of cancer every year? Nearly 100,000. Nearly 2 million children have died in agony since I first took Johnny. Since I gave him to the basilisk. I had to do this. I have a duty to save as many as I can. And the basilisk never would have helped me if I hadn't given it a child. I sacrificed one so I could save millions. No matter how hard I tried, I could not look away from the display on the other side of the glass for more than a few seconds. The otherworldly, incomprehensibly twisted form of the basilisk. Johnny's nearly unrecognizable body, trapped within. If I had gone to the government, the voice began again, they would have locked it away beneath the Pentagon. They would have tortured it, and if they ever realized the good it could do, they would have only given it to the rich. The 1% of the 1%. The corrupt, the greedy, and the perverted. I could hear the anger and bitterness in his voice. I'm going to give this cure to everyone, not just the wealthy. Soon, cancer will be a distant memory. Johnny has made a necessary sacrifice. His suffering has led to an unprecedented leap in medicine. As the recording continued, I approached the glass. Looking at the emaciated husk huddled within the chest cavity. His eye opened again, only for a second. It looked around the room, seeming to follow the web of fingers clinging to the ceiling. In the seconds before he shut his eye again, I could see Johnny's pain. His fear. Now, the recording continued, the way I see it, you have a few options. You could call your precinct, but that would be foolish. If you show them the basilisk, the CIA won't be far behind. If they don't kill you, they will brainwash you into never speaking of this again. They will take both the basilisk and Johnny away for study. He will remain in his living hell, and it will be your fault. I looked down at the gun in my hand, running my thumb over the black metal. Your second option is to kill them, the recording said. Even though I knew they were coming, I felt my heart sink into my stomach as he said those words. I trust you brought your gun? The glass is not bulletproof, and neither is the basilisk. Just a few shots is all it should take. I am no fool. I know that if the basilisk is left unattended, it will eventually leave the bunker and begin searching for other children. Just like any junkie, the high will wear off and it will search for the next one. I could not bring myself to end its life. I worked with it for many years, it is practically my colleague. For the first time since the recording began, I detected a hint of compassion in his voice. So, it is up to you, Detective Mathis. You can put Johnny out of his misery and walk away. You can be satisfied knowing that you ended his suffering the only way you could. Alternatively, you could notify the government. You could risk your own life and doom Johnny to who knows how many more years of agony. You are a pragmatic man, much like myself. I trust you will make the correct decision. And with that, the recording was over. I was left in the bunker with nothing but the hum of fluorescent lights and the horrible abomination on the other side of the glass. Looking up from my gun, I saw Johnny staring at me. Not with one eye, but both. Tears trickled down his cheeks as he gazed at me, his eyes pleading for something. I don't know what was going through his mind. I'm not even sure if he was still capable of thought after 20 years of torment. After a few seconds, the basilisk's fingers twitched again, and Johnny was pulled back into his slumber. I looked down at my gun again. My hand was trembling. A few minutes later, I stepped out of the bunker and into the cold night. The chill nipped at my skin and the barrel of my gun was still smoking. A light snow began to fall as I sat down on the hollow log. I began to sob. I wiped at my eyes, but the tears kept coming. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, I cried. As I wept, I felt my gun's weight in my hand, 2 bullets lighter than when I had arrived.
The guy moved in late last Saturday night. I know because I woke up near midnight to the screech of metal on metal. He'd rammed his U-Haul into the dumpster outside my bedroom. Not bumped. Not nudged. Rammed. I sat up in bed, the sound still ringing in my ears like a scream. From my second-story window, I watched him step out to inspect the damage. He was tall. Absurdly tall. Almost as tall as the U-Haul, and when he rested a hand on his hip, the space between his arm and chest looked big enough to fit a whole person inside. I couldn't tell what he looked like. The streetlight caught only glimpses, the outline of a square jaw, the faint gleam of pale skin, the shine of his white button-down. But even from a distance, something about him felt odd. I considered going out to help him. Just say something neighborly. But my gut twisted into knots. A voice inside whispered, "Don't open that door." I went back to bed, telling myself he'd probably appreciate me pretending I hadn't seen anything. But there was a knock at my door early the next morning. You can't imagine the jolt in my chest when I looked through the peephole and saw the same man, or at least the same shirt. From my angle, I could only see him from the chest down. Broad, unmoving, still in that starched white button-down. He was just standing there at 6 a.m. on a Sunday, silent. Did he see me watching him last night? Was he mad I didn't help? I almost didn't answer. But a part of me, the polite, socially anxious, people-pleasing part, told me I'd have to face him eventually. I took a breath, readied an apology, and opened the door. He stepped back, grinning wide. No teeth. Just gums. Blackened lips curled back in a smile too big for his face. His skin was an ashen gray, like someone dipped him in wet cement. His eyes didn't move. Didn't blink. "Let's hang out," he said, in a high-pitched, sing-song tone. No emotion, just the words. Like a glitchy cartoon from an old VHS tape. Friendly. Excited. Rehearsed. As a 6-foot-tall man, I had to crane my neck to meet his eyes. And when I did, something washed over me. It was warmth. Nostalgia. I was back in my childhood home, the smell of cookies baking in the kitchen, sunlight through the windows, my mother humming. I wanted to say yes. I fought it. I knew I didn't know this guy. I knew. But part of me did. Or wanted to. I stood there, teetering in and out of the doorway, fighting this invisible tether pulling me toward him. "Not right now, Mikey," I said. I blinked. Did I just call him Mikey? I hesitated, then shut the door. Locked it. Deadbolt, chain, all of it. Back in bed, my heart pounding, I whispered to myself, how the hell did I know his name? But like a dream, the certainty faded. Maybe I'd made it up. Just blurted the name out. I told myself it didn't matter. I just needed sleep. I woke up hours later, sunlight leaking through the blinds, and for a few minutes, everything felt normal. I lay there staring at the ceiling, vaguely remembering something strange, but my brain hadn't pieced it all together yet. Then I remembered the door. The knock. The name. Mikey. The moment I thought it, my stomach turned. I tried to shake it off. Played video games, rewatched a season of Friends, scrolled through garbage on my phone. But the unease didn't lift. It clung to me like wet clothes. I chalked it up to Sunday dread. I've always hated Sundays. That slow, quiet tension, like something's creeping up behind you and you can't turn fast enough to see it. Maybe I just hate my job more than most people. At 5:30 a.m. Monday morning, another knock. I froze. No one knocks at 5:30. Not unless something's wrong. I held my breath. Waited. But it came again, louder this time. Reluctantly, I opened the door. He was standing there, both hands out, palms up like he was offering some sacred gift. On them sat the most beautiful pastry I'd ever seen. Light and golden, fluffy like a cloud, glazed with chocolate, peanut butter, and caramel. It practically shimmered in the porch light. I didn't even think. I reached for it. The moment I touched it, memories flooded me. I was in a warm kitchen, seated at a wooden table. Mikey, taller, younger, smiling, stood at the counter frosting a perfect cupcake. He brought it to me like a birthday gift. I took a bite and nearly cried. He was my best friend. I'd known him forever. He was safety. He was home. And I loved him. But something twisted under the memories. A tight, sharp fear. Like eyes were watching me from every angle. Like I was being studied. "Let's hang out," Mikey said, reaching for me. His voice snapped me back. Too bright. Too cheerful. Too wrong. I stumbled backward and slammed the door shut. Breathing hard, I looked down at the pastry still in my hands. Except now, it was just bread. Two mismatched slices slathered with crude chunks of peanut butter and jelly. Not even a sandwich. Slabs of jelly smeared on the outside, dripping onto my wrist. Like it was made by someone who didn't understand how food works. I dropped it. At work, I couldn't focus. The algebra textbook I was editing might as well have been written in a different language. My head kept looping back to Mikey. To that strange, too sweet memory. A memory that didn't belong to me. Because I knew I'd never met him before. But I remembered him. I remembered sleepovers, road trips, Christmas mornings, kisses. It was like my mind had been hijacked and stuffed with a childhood that never happened. I made a decision. No matter what, I wouldn't answer the door again. I wouldn't talk to him. Wouldn't even look at him. If I saw Mikey, I'd run. But when I pulled into my driveway that evening, he was already waiting. He didn't knock this time. He was just standing there in the parking lot like he'd been waiting all day, unmoving, arms hanging at his sides, head tilted slightly like a curious dog. His grin widened when he saw me, gums stretched taut, lips dry and cracking, eyes locked onto mine before I could even slam the car door. "Let's hang out," he said, beaming. I turned to go. I meant to turn, to walk away. But I didn't. Instead, the moment I looked at him, my chest filled with light. I felt warm, safe, happy, like stepping out into spring after a long, gray winter. I smiled back without meaning to. He didn't move his body, not really, but somehow, he leaned in, just his head lowering toward me, bending forward without bending his back. His face was too close. His breath didn't smell like anything. His eyes, I couldn't describe them. Not really. But looking into them made something ancient stir in me. Something not mine. And then the memories came. I was small. A toddler. Laughing. My feet kicked at the sky as I soared forward on a swing set, and Mikey, tall and proud, stood behind me, pushing me again and again. His hands were huge on the chains. It was my birthday. I was blowing out candles. Mikey lit them one by one with fingers the color of cigarette ash. His long yellow nails curled over the lighter like claws. We were on a baseball field. He was my coach, patting my shoulder with encouragement. He was my best friend. He was my brother. He was my teacher. He was everything. And then we were older. I sat in the back seat of my car, sweaty palms pressed against the upholstery. Mikey leaned in. I kissed him. His lips were dry, cracked, cold. But my heart thumped in my chest like it meant something. It meant love. "Let's hang out," he whispered, eyes still glued to mine. I took a step forward. My body moved without me. But somewhere deep inside, an alarm screamed. Not in words, not even in thoughts, just a soundless, primal howling. Something feral clawed at the inside of my skull, trying to tear me away from him. I imagined going into his apartment. I imagined sitting on his couch, laughing, hugging, falling into those fake memories like they were real. Then I imagined screaming. Bloody, endless screaming. Pain like I'd never known. A void with a voice. I ran. Something in me broke loose. I turned and sprinted. I didn't look back. I slammed into my apartment and locked the door behind me. My breath came in gasps. I heard nothing outside. No knock. No footsteps. Just silence. Then it came, a knock. Soft. Precise. I grabbed my phone with shaking fingers and dialed 911. I told them there was a man who kept knocking. That he wouldn't leave. That I was scared. They said they'd send someone. I sat by the door and waited. Every second dragged like an hour. Then came the cruiser's headlights. I saw them through my window. And when I peeked through the peephole, Mikey was still there. Waiting. I didn't move from the door. I crouched there, one eye pressed to the peephole, just watching him. He didn't knock again. Just stood there. Smiling. Still. Silent. Familiar. The cruiser rolled up slow. The lights clicked off. One door opened, and the officer stepped out, casual as anything. He didn't look tense. Didn't have his hand on his holster. He wasn't scanning the area like someone who'd been told a neighbor was being harassed. He just strolled up like he was meeting an old friend. "Tommy," the officer said, voice bright. "What's going on, man? Long time no see." My heart dropped into my stomach. "Let's hang out," Mikey said. The officer smiled. "Of course, man. I really can't thank you enough for last time." I blinked hard. Last time? Through the peephole, I watched them walk away together like they were brothers, like they'd known each other forever. Mikey's impossibly long arm draped around the cop's shoulder like they were teenagers heading into a party. They disappeared into his apartment. The door closed. Then the screaming started. I backed away from the door and covered my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was wet. Not just loud, but alive, like something was being torn and devoured and sucked dry while it screamed its last breath. It echoed through the vents, through the walls, through my bones. Then, silence. I didn't sleep. I just lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling, praying for the sun. In the morning, 2 new officers showed up. I told them the truth, or part of it. That someone was harassing me. That a guy kept knocking and wouldn't go away. That I hadn't seen the officer again. They knocked on every door, even Mikey's. I didn't hear screams this time. Just laughter. Happy, relieved laughter. The kind you only hear at airport reunions and surprise parties. Like someone had found something they'd lost for years. Like coming home. I haven't left my apartment since. It's been a week. I got fired. The food's almost gone. I keep the lights on all day and night. I moved the couch in front of the door. I haven't opened the blinds. I know I'll have to go outside eventually. But what if he's there? What if he says it again? Right now, I know he's dangerous. I know none of the memories are real. I know he's something else. Not human, not alive, not anything that belongs here. But what happens when I see him? Will I remember? Will I feel safe? Will I smile? Will I follow him in? Or worse, will I already have? Because some nights I wake up with crumbs in my bed. Bits of peanut butter on my fingers. A taste in my mouth like burnt sugar and rotting fruit. And sometimes, I think I can remember swinging. And laughing. And kissing him back. Everything started with a flyer. Looking for participants. Paid sleep study. $2,500 compensation. 1 overnight stay. No known sleep disorders. Call to apply. I was unemployed, behind on rent, living off microwave noodles and fear. Easy money just to sleep? Hell, I didn't even read the fine print. I showed up at the address, a medical-looking building off campus that smelled like disinfectant and quiet regret. A woman in scrubs greeted me. Too friendly. Too still. Her badge said Dr. L.A. She led me down long hallways lit with flickering fluorescence, into a small white room. 1 bed. 1 camera. Wires. Electrodes. Air so clean it felt dead. Lie down, she said. You'll feel a little pinch. Then, sleep. That's when everything started to go wrong. I dreamed of a facility. Not that facility. A different one. Bigger. Darker. Deeper. The walls weren't white. They were a dull, fleshy pink. Something organic pulsed just beneath the surface, like muscle. Or membrane. I walked barefoot down a hallway. The floor was warm. Other people were there too, some in hospital gowns, others in regular clothes. None of them spoke. They just stared straight ahead. Wide eyes. Open mouths. A man in a lab coat walked up to me. His face moved too fast, flickering like an old film reel skipping frames. His voice sounded like static pushed through clenched teeth. Welcome to level 1. I woke up. Or at least, I thought I did. The room looked the same. Same bed, same camera. But Dr. Ellie was different. Her smile was wrong. Too wide. Like her skin had been stitched into place by someone who didn't quite understand how faces were supposed to work. Did you sleep well? She asked, tilting her head far too much. The angle was unnatural. I'm done. I want to leave. I shot upright. She blinked once. Then again. But this time, the eyelids moved sideways. You're not finished yet, she said. Every time I woke up, I was in another layer. Each room felt a little less real than the last. The ceiling rippled like water. The walls breathed. In one version, the bed had veins. In another, the camera blinked at me, literally blinked, like an eye. They told me I was making progress. That I was doing well. No subject has ever made it this far, one of them said. His voice dripped like molasses, slow, syrupy, and wrong. That's when I realized they weren't studying how I slept. They were studying how I dreamed. And I was sinking layer by layer, deeper into their world. That's when I started seeing the others, the real ones. People who'd also signed up for the sleep study. One girl, Sasha, told me she'd been there for weeks. Maybe months. They keep us dreaming, she whispered. They feed on the transitions. That flicker between sleep and waking. There's energy in it. I asked how we could wake up. She laughed, a horrible, empty sound, like something rattling in a dry throat. You can't. Not unless you reach the bottom. But no one knows where that is. One night, if you can even call it night here, I found a mirror. It was cracked. Blurry. But I saw my reflection. My skin was turning gray. My eyes sunken. Something was moving under the surface of my neck, twitching, like a worm squirming just beneath the flesh. I screamed. The mirror rippled, then showed me another version of myself. Smiling. Clean. Perfect. Behind her were the dream researchers. Their faces stretched like melting wax. Mouths open in silent howls. I shattered the mirror. It bled. That's when I started fighting back. Refusing to sleep inside the dream. Walking endlessly just to avoid the transitions. They punished me. One level down, they took time away. No day. No night. Just a dull gray light pressing into my skull like a migraine that never ended. In another layer, I heard voices. My mother. My first girlfriend. My own voice. All whispering behind the walls. They knew my memories. They knew my fears. And they used them. That level broke me. I collapsed on the floor, sobbing. Whispered, please? I just want to wake up. That's when it happened. The chief investigator. He didn't wear a lab coat. He wore my face. But not exactly, just enough to feel wrong. The teeth were too long. The smile never moved. The eyes were glassy, blank, no pupils at all. You're doing well, he said, in my voice. You're getting close to level 0. What's level 0? I croaked. Wake up, he said. If you survive. Then he touched my forehead. I screamed. I fell. Crashing through layers, like ice cracking beneath my feet. Flashes of rooms. Colors. Memories. My 5th birthday. My grandfather's funeral. My first kiss. All of it peeling away, layer by layer, as if I was being stripped down to a raw, dreaming core. And then, silence. Darkness. One word burned into my vision like static etched on a dead TV screen. Level 0. I opened my eyes. I was back. Back in the original unit. Bright lights. The real Dr. Ellie. My clothes neatly folded. A clipboard next to the bed. You've been under for 7 hours, she said, smiling gently. How do you feel? I broke down in tears. Relief flooded through me like rain after a long, cracking drought. I grabbed her wrist. It was horrible, I said. I thought I was trapped. She handed me a cup of water. Said the brain can play strange tricks during sleep. Hypnagogic. Nested dreams. Lucid cycles. All perfectly normal. I signed the forms. Took the check. Left that place as fast as I could. I ran all the way home. That night, I tried not to sleep. Every time I shut my eyes I saw them. The researchers. My reflection. My own face, rotting. I paced around my room. Drank coffee. Chewed my fingernails until they bled. But eventually, I passed out. And I woke up in a room I recognized. A bed. A camera. A clipboard. The door opened, and Dr. Ellery walked in. Only this time, she didn't even bother wearing skin. Her face was a rotting mess of tentacles and teeth, eyes blinking like barnacles growing out of her skull. Her voice didn't come from her mouth, it came from everywhere. From inside my ears. My teeth. My bones. You reached level 0, she said. But you never left. I screamed, clawed at the walls, tried to wake up, tried to move, tried to breathe. Nothing changed. The room stayed still. The clipboard now read: Subject, Ethan Cross. Sleep study, Phase 3, simulated awakening. Response, highly compliant. Status, core integrity breached. Extraction, denied. Retention, indefinite. I wasn't dreaming anymore. This was real. A reality they built. A prison made of belief. And the worst part? Every time I think I've woken up, there's another clipboard. Just now, someone knocked at my apartment door. I answered. A man was standing there, breathless, holding a crumpled flyer. Hey, he said. Did you do that sleep study thing? His hands were shaking. I can't wake up. I smiled, my mouth opening wider than it should. Come in, I said. Let me tell you how it starts. There's a place in the desert with incredible ecological diversity called the Sky Island. Specifically, the Sky Island is a 9,000-foot mountain surrounded by scorching, lifeless lowlands, its forested slopes rising abruptly from the desert floor like a green fragment of another world, drifting above the heat haze. It's the only place in the continental US you can find jaguars. Of all the time I spent looking for animals there, I never thought something would be looking for me. I would have loved to see a jaguar. But I wasn't hunting predators. I was there for reptiles, venomous, scaled, elusive creatures that most people avoid, but I couldn't resist. Dozens of species of rattlesnakes alone slither across its elevation zones. Colored lizards, spiny-tailed iguanas, Sonoran whipsnakes, each adapted to the dry, stony ridges or the cooler piney heights. I loved them enough that I took several days off from work, drove across 2 states, and burned half my savings just for a chance to spot them in the wild. The drive was relaxing at first. Long stretches of dry, cracked earth lined with creosote and towering saguaro cacti flicked past under golden sunlight. Those dusty, open roads gave me time to think, though now, I avoid them whenever I can. Especially at night. Especially alone. Usually I'd make this trip with some friends. My herpetology professor first told me about the area. A couple old college buddies shared my interest, and we made the pilgrimage once or twice before. This year, they all had plans. I told myself it would be meditative, solitary. And it was. That might have been the problem. The road I was on stretched for miles, twisting through scorched valleys, my car and the stars the only lights for hours. Scraggly creosote bushes drifted in and out of my high beams like ghosts, their twisted limbs casting strange shadows. I drove slow to avoid the toads and snakes that ventured onto the pavement at night, hoping to soak in the residual warmth. Jackrabbits darted out occasionally, spooked by the engine's purr, just long-legged flashes of fur vanishing into the dark. During the day, this road might get a couple trucks or park rangers. But between midnight and 3 a.m., you could die out there and no one would find you for days. That kind of isolation forces your mind to unspool in unpleasant directions. You stop thinking about cell service or your car's radiator and start thinking about what else might be watching, unseen, from the dark. I hit the hazards and stepped out to help a spadefoot toad across the road. I couldn't stand the idea of one getting pancaked. Outside the car, the air was cool against my skin, and the desert was hushed, crickets singing like faint static in the background. The road was darker than I remembered. The moon was hidden behind a wall of clouds. I slipped on a nitrile glove and gently scooped the little toad up, admiring the strange softness of its skin, its camouflage colors that shimmered green and brown beneath the moonlight. I took out my phone and snapped a few pictures, zooming in on the brilliant eyes, like tiny emerald marbles. It didn't move, just blinked slowly, waiting. I wondered what it thought, if it even had thoughts like we do. Then I heard a rustle. It was barely audible over the engine, just a faint scrape or shift in the creosote brush on the far side of the car. I froze. The kind of frozen where every part of you listens, not just ears, but muscles, skin, the space in your lungs where breath should be. Something was there. Something bigger than a rabbit. I told myself it was nothing. Just a fox, maybe. But the sound wasn't curious. It was deliberate. Methodical. Like it didn't care that I could hear it. I placed the toad in the grass and stepped backward quickly, my shoes crunching dry gravel. I didn't run. I don't know why. My curiosity always outweighs my fear, until it doesn't. Then, as I reached for the car handle, a jackrabbit exploded from the bushes, bounding across the road in 2 massive leaps. I jumped, adrenaline lighting my chest on fire, then let out a small laugh. I realized I'd been holding my breath the entire time. I do that when I'm scared, hold it like a diver underwater. That night, I helped a few more creatures across the asphalt, tiny rattlesnakes no thicker than a pencil, lizards with blinking orange eyes, each movement a thrill. But I kept glancing over my shoulder. The desert didn't feel empty anymore. It felt occupied. And it was only going to get worse. It was nearly 3 a.m. when I made the decision to take one last lap around a road winding through the foothills. I told myself it was the last time I'd get to be out here for another year, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something rare, something unforgettable, was waiting out there for me. I just didn't know what kind of unforgettable it would be. The farther I drove, the more the road seemed to decay. It narrowed and fractured, the shoulder vanishing, until it felt like my tires were skimming the edge of something more ancient than asphalt. I rolled the windows down to let in the night air. Cool, still, and strange. There was a scent on the wind I couldn't place. Not the usual mineral tang of desert stone or sagebrush. It was older, wet, almost, like the smell of something buried for too long. Up ahead, a whippoorwill burst into flight from the roadside, its white wing spots catching my headlights for the briefest second before vanishing into the trees. I smiled at that. You hardly ever saw one. But then something shifted. All the crickets went silent. Not gradually. 1 second their high chorus was droning, and the next, it stopped. Like someone threw a switch. My first thought was that a predator was near. A hawk. An owl. Maybe a jaguar, silent and watching. But even those wouldn't silence everything. I slowed the car. Just enough to listen. Then the engine died. Not coughed. Not sputtered. Died. Instantly. Lights off. Dashboard dead. No power steering, no AC, just the sound of rubber tires gliding to a halt on loose gravel. My foot hovered over the brake, and I felt that bloom of cold spread out from the base of my spine. It was the kind of fear that doesn't start in the chest or brain. It comes from something deeper, instinctual, animal. I reached for my headlamp on the passenger seat, flicking the button. Nothing. Dead. No click. No red light. No flash. My fingers trembled as I pulled my phone from my pocket. The screen stayed black. Everything. Every piece of modern life, every buffer between me and the rawness of the dark, dead. That's when I knew it wasn't a coincidence. One of these things failing? Sure. Batteries die. But the car, the lamp, the phone, at the exact same time? That wasn't random. That was intentional. That was orchestrated. I sat still, not blinking, not breathing. My eyes adjusted slowly. Pale sand between sage and brush came into focus, then distant outlines of cactus and tree. The sky still gleamed with stars, but now it felt wrong, flat, like a painting. The outline of the mountains was just barely visible. But even those started to feel off, unnatural in their stillness. Then I heard it. The faintest crunch. Footsteps, but slow. Measured. Like something walking without concern. I didn't turn my head. I didn't move. My eyes searched the edge of my vision for movement, anything, until they landed on the top of the ridge. At least, I thought it was the ridge. Something had moved up there. A dome shape. Smooth. Curved like the crown of a head. I blinked rapidly, trying to adjust, trying to process what I was seeing. Was it a bush? A trick of moonlight? But then it moved again, rising. No, not rising. Approaching. The shape had been at a distance. That was why it had looked small, like it was part of the mountain. But now it grew larger, creeping forward until I could make out its size more clearly. My stomach flipped when I realized the mountain hadn't moved. The figure had just been that close. Something black, solid, rounded, was standing beside my car. I wanted to scream. I wanted to lock the doors, to do anything. But I couldn't. I was frozen. Trapped. The fear had seized every joint, every tendon. And then, without any sound, click, my doors unlocked. The plastic switch on the driver's side door popped up under my arm. On its own. The kind of gentle, automatic unlock that happens when you put the car in park at the grocery store. Casual. Expected. Not like this. My hand shot to the lock and slammed it back down. I held it there, knuckles white, fingers trembling, pressing with all the force I had. My breath came in sharp, shallow gasps. My lungs burned, and the air felt heavy, tainted. On the other side of the glass, something pulled at the handle. Not violently. Not in a panic. It was calm. Experimental. Like someone who'd forgotten they locked the door. Like someone who had every intention of opening it again. And then, it leaned closer. The shape outside the window stood motionless, just inches from the glass. I couldn't see a face, not exactly, but I knew it was looking at me. I could feel it. That indescribable, primal sensation of being observed, not casually, but with purpose. It was short. No taller than a small adult. But nothing about it felt human. The posture was wrong, too still, too balanced, as if it wasn't affected by gravity in the same way we are. And the darkness around it seemed thicker, clinging to its edges like smoke. My headlights had been off for minutes, and yet it remained silhouetted, outlined just enough to be seen, but never seen clearly. I held the lock down with my full weight, fingers slick with sweat. The handle jiggled again, slightly harder this time. Still calm. Still insistent. Still wrong. I opened my mouth to scream, and that's when I made my second mistake. I inhaled. The air was different now, thick, sweet, and chemical. Like burnt plastic and crushed flowers. Something artificial, acrid, and cloying all at once. My throat closed instantly. A sharp pain stabbed through my sinuses and behind my eyes. It was as if I'd snorted electricity. I coughed hard, once, then again, before I could clamp my mouth shut. My head swam. Outside, the thing remained unfazed. It didn't startle at my coughing. It didn't flinch. Instead, it cocked its head slightly, as if curious. Observing. Then, something moved on the other side of the car. My eyes darted right. There were more of them. At least 3, maybe 4, walking slowly around the car, black forms blotting out patches of stars as they passed. No faces. No features. Just silhouettes shaped like children drawn by someone who had never actually seen one. Their proportions were off, arms too long, torsos too still. One of them reached a hand up and rested it on the passenger window. 5 fingers. But too thin. Too jointed. Each finger moving slightly, independently, like they were tasting the glass. Not tapping, not knocking, stroking. I started hyperventilating. My vision swam. My headlamp still wouldn't turn on, my phone dead in my lap, the car useless. I thought about honking the horn, flashing the lights, anything, but nothing worked. It was as if the entire vehicle had been disarmed. Inside, it felt like the air pressure was dropping. My ears popped. A low hum vibrated through the steering wheel, through my bones. I could feel it in my molars. Not a sound, but a sensation, deep and resonant, like standing too close to a jet engine just before it ignites. Another click. This time from the back. The rear door lock on the passenger side popped up. I hadn't touched that one. No hesitation this time. My body moved before my brain caught up. I lunged across the seat and slammed it back down, nearly falling over the console. As I did, I caught sight of a figure crouched just outside the rear door, inches away. This one was different. It was closer. Too close. Its head was tilted forward, almost pressed to the window. I still couldn't see a face. But there was something there, shifting beneath the darkness. Like smoke moving under skin. Pulsing slightly. It raised a hand and tapped the glass once. A dull, soft thought. I froze. And it did, too. For a second, we were locked in stillness, both holding something sacred and terrible in place. I couldn't tell if I was crying or sweating, but moisture poured down my cheeks and neck in warm rivulets. I reached for the keys. Not because I thought the car would start. Just because I had to try. My hand brushed them, and the engine turned over. Lights flashed. Dashboard blinked. The radio sparked back to life with a burst of static before I shut it off. The figures were gone. Vanished. Not fled. Not run. Gone, like smoke from a blown-out candle. 1 second there were hands on my windows, black bodies outlined against the stars, and the next, Only silence and a warm breeze through the open crack of the window. I sat frozen, engine idling, for what felt like hours. Then I started driving. I didn't think. I didn't plan a route. I just drove, faster than I should have, down that broken road, tires kicking dust into the silence. The stars above blurred into a smear of cold light as my vision tunneled. Every twist of the wheel felt like it could tip me into some deeper part of the desert, into some place I wasn't supposed to find. My hands gripped the steering wheel hard enough to make my knuckles ache, but it felt like the only thing anchoring me to reality. I didn't remember the turns I took. I didn't remember the drive back. The next thing I knew, I was parked outside the motel. The clock on the dashboard said 4:37 a.m. I was slumped forward over the steering wheel, my head resting on the leather, the seatbelt still buckled across my chest. I didn't remember arriving. I didn't remember the road, the exit, the gas station, the last 10 miles. Nothing. Just that 1 second I was alone on that godless stretch of desert road, and the next, I was safe. Or I thought I was. Then I smelled it. The ammonia-sharp scent of urine. It soaked the front of my pants and the seat beneath me. My skin was clammy, cold. Shame burned in my stomach, but it was quickly overtaken by something worse, an understanding. This had not been a dream. This had not been a moment of irrational fear. My body had reacted to something real. I sat there for a long time. The motel's flickering neon sign buzzed gently, casting sickly red and pink pulses across the parking lot. I could see the window to my room, curtains drawn, untouched since I'd left. The silence around me was heavy. Not peaceful. Not calm. It was the kind of silence that holds its breath. That waits. I eventually got out of the car, shaking legs carrying me to the door. I stripped my clothes in the bathroom and showered for an hour, scrubbing my skin until it was raw. I checked every inch of my body for marks, bruises, needle punctures, anything. There was nothing. No blood. No scratches. No sign of trauma. But I didn't feel unhurt. I barely slept. The motel room felt wrong, the lights too bright, the walls too thin. I kept expecting to see movement behind the curtains. Kept hearing faint clicks behind the walls. Kept imagining I hadn't escaped, only been let go. And that word, let, bothered me. Because I don't think they wanted to harm me. Not exactly. If they had wanted to, they could have. I was completely helpless, alone, disarmed, unable to scream, unable to move. They could have taken me, killed me, torn me apart. But they didn't. They watched. They tested. They studied. I think I wasn't the predator that night. I was the specimen. And maybe that's worse. I've had time to think since then. Too much time. I've gone over every moment again and again, trying to make sense of it, trying to force some kind of rational answer into a story that defies all logic. People ask me if I was drugged, if I had a psychotic break, if it was sleep deprivation or carbon monoxide poisoning. I've heard all the theories. None of them explain why my car, headlamp, and phone all failed simultaneously. None of them explain the identical reports I found online. Other desert travelers describing silhouettes in the dark, memory lapses, a humming sound just before blackout. None of them explain the dreams I've had since. In them, I'm back in the car. It's always just before the moment, before the locks click. But this time, I don't hold my breath. This time, I inhale when I'm supposed to. I open the door. I step out. I walk into the brush. And the figures step aside, as if I belong with them. I wake up soaked in sweat, heart racing, throat raw from screaming. But worse than that, I wake up smiling. As the last coherent thoughts in my head begin to splinter, I need to explain how I got here, why I scream at walls and fear my own reflection. If anyone finds this, don't believe the reports. I'm not insane. Not completely. This is a warning. Never take something when the dealer can't name it. It started like most of our weekends, lazy, hazy, harmless. It was always me, Brian, and Roger. We'd known each other since middle school, lived like overgrown teenagers in our late 20s. Life didn't press on us much. Dead-end jobs, cheap rent, and just enough substances to blur out what we hadn't become. That Friday night, I pulled into Brian's driveway like usual. The street was foggy, unnaturally so. The neighborhood was too quiet, like someone had hit mute on the world. I chalked it up to exhaustion and walked in. Brian was grinning wide, eyes a little too glassy, fingers fidgeting. "Got something new?" he said. "Real trippy stuff. It's like, it turns your brain inside out." I laughed. "You say that like it's a good thing." He pulled out a Ziploc bag. 6 tiny black pills, glossy like beetle shells, pulsing faintly when the light hit them. "No name?" I asked. "Nope. Guy said it's imported. Ancient shit. Said we'd come back different." "You took one?" "2 last night," Brian said. "Felt like I rode on the back of God." I didn't believe him. But then again, that was the point. Roger stumbled in, late and drunk. As always. When Brian showed him the pills, Roger chuckled and said, "Hope I see my ex in the trip. Gotta settle some unfinished business." We turned on music, dimmed the lights, and swallowed the pills. They tasted wrong. Like ash and static. The come-up was slow. Euphoric, even. Laughter came easy. Roger danced. Brian made stupid jokes about turning into reptiles. Then Roger went to the bathroom. He was gone for longer than he should have been. When he came back, his pupils were the size of dimes, black voids stretching wide. His skin looked waxy, like a mannequin beginning to melt. "You okay?" I asked. He stared blankly. "There's a room inside the room, bro. You just have to peel the air." I laughed, uneasily. Brian went to the bathroom next. I followed a minute later. As I pissed, I stared at the grout between the tiles. It began crawling, like maggots burrowing through drywall. My skin flushed cold. My body relaxed in a way that didn't feel like release, it felt like surrender. I stepped out, and the house was gone. We were inside a giant metallic chamber. The walls throbbed, almost breathing. Pipes extended from the ceiling like veins. The air smelled like burnt copper and rot. Roger was face down on the floor, twitching. Brian stood above him, naked, skin shimmering like mercury. "What the fuck is this?" I asked. Brian's mouth moved, but no sound came. Instead, a high-pitched ringing split through the room. I blinked, and I was back in the bathroom again. Except, the mirror was missing, and I could see my reflection in the tile. But it wasn't moving right. It blinked after I did. When I stepped into the hallway, Roger was on the floor again. "Are you okay?" I asked, heart pounding. Brian turned, but his face was off. His eyes were on the sides of his head, fish-like. His mouth was vertical, running from chin to nose. A low growl leaked out as his smile stretched beyond what a face should allow. "You've been standing there a long time," he whispered. "Time doesn't like that." I backed away. My hand brushed the wall, and it felt wet. Sticky. Pulsing. I tried to scream but couldn't. My mouth was filled with something. Hair? Dirt? Blood? I clawed at my throat. And then I was walking out of the bathroom again. Roger was on the floor. Brian was watching me. "Same place," I muttered. "We're stuck." Brian's voice sounded like it was underwater. "You're the one keeping us here." "I want out." "You took the door, man," he said. "It's open now. You're just seeing what was always behind it." Roger stood up suddenly. His skin had cracked. His teeth were long and sharp, like shattered porcelain. Eyes completely red. He screeched, a mix between a baby crying and a pig being slaughtered. I ran. I sprinted upstairs, lungs burning, but the staircase was longer than it should have been, impossibly long. Each step echoed, and the echo spoke back. "He's coming. He's coming. He's coming." I reached the top and slammed the bathroom door. Silence. Then scratching. Then breathing. Not normal breathing. Wet, slow, right behind the door. I pressed my back against the bathroom door, heart punching against my ribs. The light above flickered, buzzing like a dying fly. And then, whispers. Dozens of voices, speaking all at once. Not outside the door, inside the walls. Chanting in a language I didn't know, but understood deep in my spine. He peeled the sky. He saw beneath the floor. He let them in. The tile under my feet began to darken, as if soaked in oil. I looked down and saw my reflection again, but this time it was smiling, even though I wasn't. Then it winked. I vomited. I splashed water on my face, but it came out black, a thick sludge that moved on its own. It climbed my arms like it wanted inside me. I screamed and looked up. There was no mirror. Just a hole in the wall where the mirror should be. A perfectly round black circle, pulsing slightly. Inside it, I saw a room. Roger was there, hanging upside down. His jaw unhinged. His limbs twisted like chicken bones. He was whispering. The trip never ends. It just changes shape. I blinked. Now it was just my face in the mirror again. But my eyes were missing. I fell to the floor, shaking. Bam. The door jolted. Then again. Something hit it hard. A third time, the hinges groaned. I screamed, "Alexa, call 911. Silence. Then the voice came through Alexa. But it wasn't Alexa. There is no help for what you swallowed. I whimpered. Then came footsteps, slow and uneven. The scratching returned. Except it wasn't nails now. It was something wet dragging across wood. Like a slug made of meat. Brian's voice rasped through the gap under the door. "Come out, man. It's chill." Roger's feeling better now. He just had to let the bugs out. "Leave me alone." "You're already alone," said Roger. Then, silence. I waited. 10 minutes? 20? An hour? My phone buzzed in my pocket. No number. Just a message. "We are inside now." The lights went out. I opened the door, desperate to escape. But the hallway wasn't there anymore. Just darkness. No walls. No ceiling. Just black static stretching in every direction. Brian stood in the middle, glowing faintly. Naked. His stomach was open like a mouth, ribcage cracked wide, filled with hundreds of blinking eyes. "You wanted to see," he whispered. Roger emerged behind him, skin gone entirely. He was made of meat and teeth, oozing laughter that didn't fit a human mouth. They lunged at me. Their mouths weren't mouths anymore, they were openings, pulling me into themselves. I felt teeth on my neck. I heard crunching. My own bones? I screamed. And I was walking out of the bathroom again. Roger was on the floor. Brian on the couch. Normal. Except, Roger's head turned all the way around. He stared at me upside down, smiling too wide. "You're back," he said. "We were worried you got lost. The trip's deeper now." Brian stood. He held something in his hand. My heart. Beating. "You dropped this," he said, tossing it to me. I caught it. It kept beating. I snapped awake. Still in the house. The room was normal again. Roger stood over me. "Bro, are you okay? You're bleeding." I looked down. My arm was shredded like I'd clawed through my own skin. Brian was on the phone. "Yeah, we need help." He's freaking out, man. I backed away. Stop playing tricks," I mumbled. Roger stepped toward me. I saw his shadow stretch out behind him, too long, too thin, too fast. I screamed and grabbed the nearest thing, a lamp. I swung. The lamp smashed Roger's face. He collapsed. Blood spilled. Brian screamed. "What the fuck are you doing?" I hit Brian next. His face cracked like ceramic. Everything cracked. The walls. The air. Even my own thoughts fractured like glass. I ran. Upstairs. Into the bathroom. Slammed the door. "Alexa, Call 911. I cried. But Alexa didn't answer. Instead, my reflection in the faucet did. You killed them in every version of reality. There is no waking up. I don't remember falling asleep. I only remember the feeling of sinking, like my body wasn't resting, it was being dragged down, pulled through layers of wet sand and static. I woke up in the bathtub. No water, just dirt. Thick, wet soil, the kind you dig up at a burial site. My fingernails were cracked and bleeding, raw from trying to claw out. The walls were covered in symbols, etched deep, as if by fingernails or bone. I couldn't understand them, but every line pulsed like veins. They felt alive. And I knew, somehow, they were about me. I stumbled out of the tub and faced the mirror. No reflection. Instead, I saw Roger, still lying on the basement floor. His skull crushed in, the lamp beside his twitching hand. Then the mirror flickered. Now it was me standing over Roger. Again. But this time, I was smiling. Covered in blood. My eyes black pits, endless, stretching into forever. I whispered to myself. You always do it. Every time. Every version. I bolted out of the bathroom. The hallway was longer again. Wrong. It didn't end in the stairs anymore, it ended in a door. One I'd never seen before. Old, heavy, with a rusted black knob. It seemed to breathe. The wood groaned softly, like lungs pushing out a final breath. I should have run the other way. Instead, I opened it. Inside was nothing. No floor. No ceiling. Just a void, but not silent. In that void, I heard laughter. Infinite. Shifting. Familiar voices all blending together, echoing like they were inside my skull. Brian. Roger. My own voice. All warped. Then I heard a new voice. You're the doorway, not the guest. I fell forward. The world rebuilt itself around me like collapsing scaffolding. I landed in the basement, but not the one I knew. The carpet was soaked, sticky, red. It reeked of iron and something worse, rotten copper and decay. Brian was on the couch. Or what used to be Brian. His limbs were too long. His neck had unhinged, stretching upward like a periscope. His mouth gaped wide, filled with writhing fingers instead of teeth. Welcome back, he gurgled. He's awake now. Who's awake? I asked, trembling. He pointed behind me. I turned. Roger stood there, except it wasn't Roger anymore. His body floated an inch above the ground. His face was peeled away, revealing rows of shifting mouths underneath. His voice came from everywhere, from the walls, the floor, the blood itself. I told you, the trip doesn't end. You just peeled back too far. You saw what sleeps under the skin of reality. I screamed. I ran. But the door was gone. The basement had no exits anymore. I tried to climb the walls. They writhed under my hands, pulsing, gurgling. I saw eyes form beneath the paint, watching me, blinking out of sync. Brian and Roger moved closer. They whispered in unison. You let it in. You opened the black door. I dropped to the floor and closed my eyes, shaking, crying, trying to wake up. Then I heard sirens. Voices. Real ones. I opened my eyes. The basement was normal. Blue carpet. Dim lights. The TV on pause. Roger was on the ground. Not floating. Not monstrous. Just broken. Unmoving. His face was gone. Blood pooled beneath him like ink spreading across a page. Brian was kneeling beside him, sobbing. Jesus, man. What did you do? What the fuck did you do? I backed into the wall. It's not real, I whispered. It's still the trick. It has to be. Brian grabbed his phone. I'm calling the cops. You lost it, man. You fucking lost it. No, I said, louder. They're not real. You're not real. He looked at me like I was a stranger. "You're covered in blood." I glanced down. He was right. It was everywhere. On my arms, my clothes, my chest. The lamp. The twitching body. I heard footsteps. Knock at the door. "This is the police. We got a 911 call." Brian ran upstairs, shouting, "Please, help." He attacked my friend. But I didn't move. I stood frozen. Because the walls were bleeding again. Thin trails of red running like tears from every corner of the room. The officers entered. 2 of them. Guns drawn. Shouting orders. I raised my hands. "Please?" I didn't mean to. I thought it was the pills. I thought I was dreaming. They stared at me, and then both smiled. Their eyes turned red. Their teeth grew sharp. The officer closest to me said, "You thought calling us would save you?" The other one laughed. "We've been watching since you swallowed the black." They lunged. Their faces split down the center. Each side peeled away like flower petals made of meat, revealing black voids beneath. I screamed as they tore into me. And then, I was back, sitting on the basement couch. Brian beside me. Roger laughing at something stupid on TV. My hands were clean. No blood. No wounds. No bodies. Just the sound of laughter and a paused movie. Roger turned to me. Smiled. "You alright, man? You zoned out." Brian handed me a glass of water. The 2 black pills rested in his palm. "Still wanna try 'em?" I stared at the pills. They glistened like oil in Brian's hand, catching the light in a way that made them look alive. For a moment, I truly didn't know if I had taken them yet. Hadn't we already done this? Hadn't I watched Roger die? Hadn't I killed him? Still wanna try him? Brian asked again, his voice exactly the same as it had been the first time. Same grin. Same room. Same everything. Except now I saw it. The tiny cracks in reality. A shimmer in the corner where the shadows didn't align with the furniture. The TV screen showed a paused image, but behind the glass, something shifted, too fast to be human. Like a shape trying not to be seen. I didn't answer him. I couldn't. Because I felt it now. That the trip had never ended. That I'd never stopped walking out of the bathroom. Every version of reality I'd lived through, each reset, each death, each scream, was just a different angle of the same nightmare. There was no ground anymore. No floor to stand on. Just layers. Peeling. Stretching. Tearing. Roger lit a joint and tossed it to me like nothing had happened. "Man, I'm telling you," he said, "this weekend's gonna be legendary." I stared at his face. Intact. Normal. Human. But when he turned away, I saw it again, his shadow twitched. It moved a second later than his body. Out of sync. It had horns. Brian handed me the pills. "Don't be a bitch." And for some reason, I took them. Again. The swallow was instant. The regret was eternal. This time, I didn't pass through the stages of euphoria. There was no laughter. No nostalgia. Just a straight descent. The couch turned to flesh beneath me. It breathed. The walls melted into teeth. The ceiling opened like a lid, revealing a black sky full of watching faces, each one my own, twisting, laughing, crying, whispering. "You let it out. You let us in." Brian and Roger stood up, but their arms were too long now. Their fingers touched the floor. Their faces melted off like wax, revealing thousands of tiny black doors where their eyes should have been. They screamed, not with mouths, but with the space around them. Reality itself shrieked. I tried to run. There was no exit. The stairs were gone. The door a wall now. I clawed at it, sobbing, begging to wake up. To feel anything that wasn't wet meat and bones cracking underfoot. And then a light appeared. A hole in the wall, shaped like a human body. And it fit me. As if the world had carved out my silhouette. The voice returned, ancient and close. Step through. You belong here now. So I did. And I kept falling. Through versions of myself. Through memories I never lived. Through deaths I never died. I drowned in my own bathtub. I was eaten by Brian. I stabbed Roger in a mirror maze made of my own teeth. I sat in a padded room, scribbling black circles onto the floor with blooded fingers. Each version ended the same way. Me walking out of the bathroom. Roger on the floor. Brian on the couch. Still wanna try him? Eventually, I stopped resisting. I stopped crying. I stopped caring. Because something inside me broke. Something that understood what mattered, who I was, what was real, what could be saved. Gone. All I had left was the loop. I'm in a room now. Sterile. White. Padded. They call me James, but I don't think that's my name. They say I attacked my friends after a drug-induced psychotic break. Killed one. Maimed the other. They say I screamed for hours about teeth in the walls and mirrors that breathe. But when they show me pictures of Roger, it's not him. It's never him. They tell me he died. But sometimes, I hear him whisper from the air vent. It's okay, bro feels like marshmallows. Sometimes I see Brian in the mirror, even though he's in prison. Sometimes the pills are back in my hand. Sometimes I wake up in the basement again. And when I sleep, I see the black door. Always closed. Always waiting. But I know the truth now. It's not just a door. It's me. I opened it. I was always the door. So if you're reading this, if someone hands you a pill with no name, if your friend says the trip only lasted 10 minutes, if the floor starts to feel like it's watching you, don't take it. Don't look at the mirror. Don't answer the voice. Because once the black door opens, it never closes. The house was a steal. That should have been the first red flag. A 3-bedroom craftsman with a wraparound porch for less than the cost of my cramped 2-bedroom apartment. It was in a quiet, secluded subdivision called Maple Creek, where all the lawns were impossibly green and the neighbors waved with all 5 fingers. The HOA president, a woman named Carol with a smile as bright and hard as a porcelain doll's, met me on my first day. She handed me a welcome basket with a bottle of cheap Chardonnay and a single, laminated sheet of paper. "We're so glad to have you, Mark," she said, her eyes crinkling in a way that didn't seem genuine. "We're very relaxed here at Maple Creek. We don't have rules about lawn height or fence colors. We only have one." She tapped a perfectly manicured nail on the laminated sheet. On it, in a large, friendly font, were the words. "Rule number 1. If you see a pet that appears lost or in distress, do not approach it. Do not feed it. Do not let it into your home. Go inside, lock your doors, and ignore it until it has gone." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. What, are the raccoons organized crime around here? Carol's smile didn't waver. "It's not a suggestion, Mark. It's the only thing we require of you. It is for the safety and harmony of the community." Her tone was light, but her eyes were deadly serious. It was the first time I felt a chill in the warm afternoon air. For the first month, it was perfect. Quiet. Peaceful. I almost forgot about the bizarre rule. I'd see people walking their dogs on leashes, cats sunning themselves on porches. They were clearly owned, clearly where they were supposed to be. The rule seemed like a weird quirk from a bygone era. Then came the storm last night. It was a real gully washer, with thunder that shook the windows and rain that came down in sheets. It was around midnight when I heard it, a sound that cut through the noise of the storm. A pathetic, high-pitched whine. I peered through my living room window. Huddled under the eave of my porch, shivering and soaked, was a golden retriever. It was beautiful, with big, sad eyes and a leather collar, but no tags. Every time the thunder cracked, it would press itself against my door and cry. My heart broke. The laminated card was sitting on my counter, and Carol's words echoed in my head. "Go inside, lock your doors, and ignore it." But how could I? It was just a dog. A scared, lost animal. What was the worst that could happen? I'd be breaking some stupid, arbitrary rule from a power-tripping HOA president. So I did it. I opened the door. The dog practically fell inside, shaking a puddle onto my hardwood floor. It looked up at me with such gratitude, nudging its wet head into my hand. I got it a towel and a bowl of water, and it immediately settled down on my rug, letting out a contented sigh. I felt a wave of relief. See? Just a dog. I fell asleep on the couch watching TV. I was woken up a few hours later by a sound that wasn't the storm. A knock. A slow, deliberate knock on my front door. The rain had stopped. The dog on the floor lifted its head, let out a low growl, and then, strangely, trotted to the door, its tail giving a single, lazy wag. I looked through the peephole. Standing on my porch was a man. He was tall, impossibly tall, dressed in a neat, old-fashioned suit, like a door-to-door salesman from the 1950s. He was smiling, a wide, friendly smile that showed too many teeth, all of them perfectly straight and white. I opened the door a crack, my hand still on the chain. "Can I help you?" "Good evening," the man said, his voice smooth and pleasant. "I do apologize for the late hour. I believe you found my dog." He gestured with his head toward the retriever, who was now sitting patiently at his feet, looking up at him. "Oh, yeah, he was out in the storm," I said, my relief making me feel foolish for ever being scared. "Glad you found him." The tall man's smile widened, stretching his face in a way that felt unnatural. "He has a habit of getting out. He's a bit of a rascal." He leaned forward, his eyes, dark and unblinking, locking onto mine. "But he's very good at his job." My blood ran cold. His job. The man chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. He reached down and patted the dog's head. "Of course," he said, his gaze never leaving mine. "His job is to find the kindest person in the neighborhood." He straightened up, his towering frame seeming to block out all the light from the porch. "Thank you so much for your hospitality," the man said, his smile finally reaching his eyes, which now glinted with a terrifying, hungry light. "He likes you very much. He's decided he wants you to meet the rest of the family." My mind screamed at me to slam the door. Slam it, lock it, run. But my body wouldn't obey. I was a statue, my hand frozen on the door. The man's smile never faltered as he gave the door a gentle push. The brass security chain didn't snap or break. It stretched, elongating like taffy with a soft, metallic groan before falling away, limp and useless. "There now," he said pleasantly. "That's better." He didn't enter. He simply took a step back and gestured with an open palm toward the street. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. And for reasons I can't explain, I found myself stepping out onto the porch. The golden retriever trotted ahead of us, its tail held high. The air was different out here. The storm had washed everything clean, but the world felt muted, like I was looking at it through a pane of smoked glass. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe and twist at the edges of my vision. As we walked, I noticed other things. A sleek black cat emerged from beneath a hedge, its eyes glowing with a faint phosphorescence. It fell into step beside the retriever. A few houses down, a parrot was perched on a mailbox. It didn't squawk or speak, it just swiveled its head, tracking our progress in perfect silence. They were all moving with us. An honor guard of silent, watchful animals. I looked at the houses we passed. Through their big picture windows, I could see my neighbors. They were frozen in place, like mannequins in elaborate dioramas. One family was sitting around a dinner table, forks raised halfway to their mouths. In another house, a man was stopped mid-stride, one foot hovering over the floor. They were all facing our direction, their faces blank, their eyes wide and vacant. "Don't mind them," the tall man said, noticing my gaze. "They're very good at following the rules." We were heading toward the end of the cul-de-sac, to the oldest house on the block, a large colonial that had been dark and seemingly empty since I'd moved in. As we got closer, I could feel a low vibration through the soles of my shoes, a deep hum that seemed to emanate from the house itself. The golden retriever led the procession up the walkway and sat patiently before the heavy oak door. The other animals formed a silent semicircle behind us, their eyes all fixed on me. The tall man walked to the door. It swung open before he touched it, revealing nothing but a deep, impenetrable darkness inside. The low hum grew louder, resonating in my bones. It sounded like a purr. A gigantic, hungry purr. The man turned to me, his smile as wide and terrifying as ever. He gestured into the blackness. "After you," he said. "They've been so looking forward to this."